Hello everyone, ladies and gentlemen, kids of all ages, my name is Abby, and welcome back to another episode of Gregtech New Horizons. Last time, we just basically ran all the way through LV, getting a wood farm and getting our first bits of aluminum. And this time, we're gonna round out LV and start our feet, dip our toes, into early medium voltage. The things you need for any voltage tier in Gregtech are the material and the circuits. In our case, we have one of the two. We have the material for medium voltage, and that is aluminum. We do not have the circuits yet, and we don't quite have the materials to make the circuits yet. In order to make circuits for NV, we need diodes, and diodes take gallium arsenide. We've gotten a bit of gallium from electrolyzing scholorite, but we have not gotten arsenic yet. And that is what I've been doing for the past little bit. I've been working on trying to get arsenic. The thing about arsenic is that in low voltage, you don't really have any ways of electrolyzing or centrifuging it out of something. So I have been making a basic miner machine, which is what you've been seeing for the past minute and a half, in order to get it from realgar ore in the nether. This is the only way to get arsenic at this tier, electrolyzing it out of realgar ore. And I could mine the realgar ore by hand. Realgar ore, by the way, only comes in small variants, so there's not veins of realgar. It is just very sparingly in the world. And I could mine it up by hand, but I thought that would be really boring and also just really time consuming. So I decided to set up this miner to do it for me, and it will also allow me to get a bunch of realgar compared to if I did it by hand. It's a very simple setup, and the mining pipes just take steel pipes, so I let it run in the background. Diodes aren't the only thing I'm missing for MV circuits. I was also missing the good circuit boards. I'm still working on getting the good circuit boards, but the phenolic circuit boards is the first part of them that I can do. After this, I realized that my mining machine is done running, and I can start centrifuging the realgar into arsenic and sulfur. As a whole, it becomes a lot easier to get arsenic later on. Not so much for gallium. But there's our first bits of arsenic out of there. And we can start making our first bits of gallium arsenide as well. Gallium arsenide crystals. Before that, we start working on getting the good circuit boards. I'm doing this the more advanced way that uses less gold, just because I think it's more fun. And that just takes hydrochloric acid, which is just a bunch of microcrafting along with it. Hydrogen and chlorine to get hydrochloric acid, and then hydrochloric acid turns to ferric chloride. And then that ferric chloride turns into stuff that we use to etch our circuit boards. Additionally, while this is happening, I'm working to replace my pipes in my base with poten. The reason I'm doing this is because poten is, on the whole, cheaper than steel, or steel has more uses than poten does. And also, poten transfers more fluids. It is a higher throughput. Also, I get my gallium arsenide crystal up and running. It's literally nothing. I set up the stuff in order to get the phenolics, the good circuit boards. The making it with iron 3 chloride is slightly more efficient in that it only takes one gold ingot in order to make one board instead of 4. Also, I get the gallium arsenide crystal and I get the good circuit boards, just like that. I decided to route it out to a full 10 because I have enough phenolic circuit boards and enough gold for that. I got the gallium arsenide dust and I started making the diodes. To get the molten glass, I have to melt quartzite, so it's a pretty slow process. It takes 30 seconds per each. And that's kind of most of the parts of the MV circuits done. We got the circuit boards, we got the diodes, and all the rest of it is really simple. Just little bit later, and we get our first two MV circuits, the good electronic circuits. These are the first MV ones we can make, and they're not cheap. They take 3 LV circuits with the current recipe. But fortunately, the first thing I'm looking to make with the MV circuits isn't even an MV machine. It's actually the low voltage circuit assembler, which takes MV circuits to craft. And also an emitter and robot arms and whatever, but it's besides that, it's a relatively simple craft, and it just takes the tier above circuit. But there's the basic circuit assembler. The advantage of having the circuit assembler is that it will allow me to make circuits for much cheaper. Well, not much cheaper, but significantly cheaper. Uh, the advantage at this point is the fact that I only need to use 2 LV circuits for each MV circuit I want to make, rather than 3. So that cuts it down by 33%, which is always nice. Plus, it makes LV circuits cheaper too. Now I'm starting to rewire my steam setup and use potent fluid pipes instead of small steel fluid pipes, just so that I can transfer more steam. But there we go. So we got our MV, we got things set up. We're pretty much ready to kind of run off with a little bit more LV workings, or MV workings. Before that, 64 motors. Again. Yee. Anyways, at this point I want to start thinking about medium voltage power more. So the way Gregtech power works is that going up a voltage tier requires you to use 4 times as much energy and have different cables. In this case, I need a transformer. I decided that instead of separating my MV power from my LV power, I'm going to just use a transformer on one of my, I guess, machine blocks and put my MV machines there. I'm not going to be making a lot of MV machines at the moment, so I'm able to just do that. Right now, the first MV machine I'm looking towards is an extruder of all things. I'll get into why I want that pretty shortly here, but here I'm making the low voltage transformer, and I get the machine block for the medium voltage machine. Because I have 4 amps of LV coming up here, I can already just transform that up into 1 amp of MV power without any fussing or faffing around with things. It'll just get me 1 amp of MV, which is perfectly fine, even though it can probably barely one run machine at a time. I'm probably not going to be running more than 1 machine for this section of MV, so it's totally fine. It works well enough for what I need, and what I need is just quick MV power. I'm also using basic copper cables just because they're the ones I have on hand the most. Here I make my first MV circuits within the circuit assembler. It's much better making MV circuits with only 2 electronic circuits rather than 3. I also work on making MV electric motors. The electric motors in MV are a little bit difficult. They take aluminum rods, copper nickel wires, and copper cables, but they're not anything that I haven't made before. The copper nickel we needed for the coil blocks for the electric blast furnace, after all, and rods are exactly the same. Anyways, let's get to explaining, after I make this piston here, why I want the MV extruder, because after I get this piston, I have the extruder open right now. The reason I want the MV extruder is because I can extrude out rods. The lathe turns one ingot into 1 rod and 2 dusts. It's efficient, I guess, but it's pretty slow, and it's just kind of bad to use. The extruder extrudes 1 ingot into 2 rods. It is so much better. It is a lovely quality of life improvement, and honestly, kind of the last quality of life improvement we get for subcomponent manufacturing. Because now we can make like pipes and rods and rotors pretty much always the most efficient way possible. quality of life improvement that is much long awaited, and it is something that I have been wanting since I got to MV, because I love being able to turn one ingot into two rods. What I was doing there was I was getting the clipboard. The clipboard is something that will just, I can write down on it and it will help me organize my thoughts. As for what I put on the clipboard, it's pretty simple stuff. I make a to-do list of things to do, and that includes, in this case, getting more MV machines, getting oil production set up, and automating lubricant. All of which we actually end up doing today. So let's get to it. As mentioned in the last episode, in order to make aluminum, you need alumina and cryolite. Cryolite is just an ore that you can mine. Alumina is not an ore, so we have to do different methods to get it. The way I was getting alumina before was by centrifuging it out of sapphire dust. But that is an incredibly inefficient and slow way of doing it. What I want eventually is an electrolyzer, because then there is multiple options that I can electrolyze in order to get a good amount of the dusts. Red granite, clay, and kyanite, and there's just a bunch of different options once I have access to the MV electrolyzer. Also, I make an arc furnace here, which allows me to make wrought iron and annealed copper more efficiently. Anyways, the MV electrolyzer is the next goal for me, because it will allow me to get aluminum much easier, which is obviously what I want, because I need aluminum in order to make more MV machines. It kind of loops back in on itself. The MV electrolyzer is fortunately fairly easy to make, because all it takes is just the machine hole, so it just takes the 9 aluminum required for it. Because it doesn't take any subcomponents or any of that. No need to faff around. No need to faff around with that. You can just make it with the machine hole and the circuits. The first way I end up getting alumina from it is by electrolyzing red granite dust, because I just kind of thought it would be the best option. It gets a decent amount of aluminum for what it's worth, and it also gets me potassium feldspar, and I'll probably use that for something. I can't imagine why I wouldn't use potassium feldspar eventually. So for context, we were spending maybe about 6 minutes to get 1 alumina dust, and now in 6 seconds we get 5 alumina dust. So it is definitely much better now. But with alumina gotten, well, now I want to expand. I want to spread my wings, so I start work on building more to the base. Now I want to start working on that automated lubricant thing I was talking about. Lubricant I use for a lot of things, including cutting machines and also dynamo hatches. So in this case, I want to get lubricant. And the way you can get lubricant is you can get it by distilling creosote oil. Now, funnily enough, creosote oil can also be used to power combustion generators. So I decide, why not just put my automated lubricant setup literally right next to my creosote oil? So that's exactly what I do. the creosote oil funnels both the combustion generators and the distillery. Honestly, I don't even need two of them, but I just have two of them, mostly just because, I don't know, it was fun. Uh, and yeah, I mean, it's as simple as that. Just creosote oil powers the generators and powers the distillery, and that fills up a tank, which will fill up with a bunch of lubricant as long as I give it time. I have 800,000 buckets of creosote built up, so it should be fine. I start work on my next MV machine, which is going to be the MV assembling machine. That one came quick, didn't it? The MV assembling machine, I actually don't need this. You see, originally one of my plans was going to be getting the Hunger No More quest complete, which I thought required the MV assembling machine, but it actually doesn't now. So there goes that plan. I also didn't even accomplish that quest, so yay. But yeah, well, now I have the MV assembling machine, which, I mean, it's not like that's a bad thing. It's just, I didn't really need it. Makes diamond chests. Now I'm electrolyzing clay for my aluminum, but I'm also working on the little bit in pieces for the basic pump. Because my big plan, so we have more MV machines, we have automated lubricant. What is the next plan? Oil production. And in this case, we're going to get ourselves diesel automation. This is the big plan for the rest of the episode. Automate diesel. Diesel is a very good and useful source of power, and it is going to last us through MV and through a decent amount of HV as well. It's a very useful, very bulky form of power, and it's not too hard to do. I also make the Thaumcraft wand. Yeah, I want to get into a little bit of Thaumcraft here, and you're going to see why pretty shortly as well. But yeah, that's the next big plan. Get oil, and also start on little bits of Thaumcraft. I just dig my way through a few of the veins in the Twilight Forest. All of the Thaumcraft infused veins spawn at the Twilight Forest, so it's not really difficult to get a large amount of the resources. The only weird thing is that for some reason the Peridotio vein, Peridotio can't be mined with an iron mining level, which is bizarre because all the other ones can. So I don't know what's up with that. Anyways, I make my thermometer there, and I have basically all the stuff to get into Thaumcraft and stuff. And the real reason I want Thaumcraft is for something called the Thirsty Tank. You see, to get automated water, I can use something like the Railcraft water tank, which I have been using for the latest while. But also, I can use the Thaumcraft Thirsty Tank, which is the one I want to use. First, though, I get Thaumium made, and then this one is for tallow. And then I complete another Thaumcraft thing for Nitor, and then I get the one for Research Expertise. So yes, my goal is to get the Thirsty Tank. The Thirsty Tank is just pretty useful. It automatically collects water when it's next to a source block, so that's nice. And for that, I need to get through a little bit of Thaumcraft, but it's not a lot to get to the Thirsty Tank, so luckily we don't have to go over it that heavily. And in general, I'm not going to go over Thaumcraft much. It took me like a few hours in order to like get fully into Thaumcraft and have all the things researched, but that's all boring and not super important. So I'm just going to show the highlights and all the quests I end up completing in it, or all the pages I end up completing in it. On that note, here's Greedy Chest, or Hungry Chest. Here is Greedy Chest, and after that is the tank, the Thirsty Tank. Hey, that was the thing I was going for. It's not that hard to make. So I I put off on making it because now I want to start working on the oil a little bit more. So this oil well is pretty close to where my base is, and I set up a bit of a, I guess, drilling outpost on it. These oil wells can have an absolutely ridiculous amount of oil in it, so I'm not too worried about moving it, so I make it look semi-permanent, even if it's not actually going to be permanent. The whole making of the oil well doesn't really take too long. And really, I just want it for aesthetic reasons. Now, more specifically, you're going to see that a lot of my oil collection is going to be all about aesthetic. But here we go. Here's the start of oil. And it's going to take a little bit because it's got to go all the way down into the big part of the oil well first. But, I mean, as it stands, it doesn't look that bad. So how am I going to bring the oil back to my base for processing? A normal person would use long distance pipelines because they're good. I, in in no small part thanks to a friend of mine who's been liking this series, wants me to use trains. And so I am going to use railcraft locomotives in order to bring the oil from the oil outpost to the base. I'm doing this mostly just for because of her, but also because I feel like it'd be a fun challenge. I don't want to just use the typical, always, every best option all the time. And I feel like a subway system would look actually pretty sick. Plus, I want to learn a little bit more about railcraft, so might as well learn now. Uh, the subway, you're gonna see, I spent a lot of time working on it, and right now I'm just kind of getting the part at my base finished, and then I'm gonna work on the big tunnel connecting the two of them. The locomotive is kind of the same as the regular railcraft steam setups, where you fill it with water and you fill it with fuel, and it goes. And I need linking tracks and fuel loaders and fuel unloaders in order to get the automation to properly work before I can even really hook it up. Uh, I'm not going to get into the specifics of exactly how these things work, exactly how I set them up, because honestly, I can't remember. And it's not even super important. It's just that I had to set up the fuel loaders and the fuel unloaders at both the start and stop of the station in order to get it to automatically export the oil and import it in coal into the engine and all that. So now, let's construct the railway. While I was constructing that tunnel, I was desperately looking for an Enderman to get the Ender Pearl for the Avarice Pearl. But I couldn't get that, so I decided to get an Enderman from the Coins quest instead, in order to get the necessary Liquid Ender for an Ender Pearl. I'm sad I couldn't kill an Enderman for it, but it was very annoying to even attempt to, so I gotta take what I can get. While I'm working on a bigger Thaumcraft streak, I get the Goggles of Revealing, I also get the Gold Wand Caps, and I get the Greatwood Wand Core. I can't do anything with those quite yet, but hey, we'll get to it eventually. And with all the nonsense with the Avarice Pearl done, I can make the Thirsty Tank. This thing, I didn't really need it specifically for oil, but I'm going to need it later eventually, just because it's a really efficient way of collecting water, of automatically getting water. So might as well get it right now instead of waiting until later. And I set up the cart automation on the track. I don't want to get into how I did this because it took me way longer than it should have, because I had the fluid loader and the fluid loader and the fluid unloader switched around. So, yeah, that was fun. Here you can see the thirsty tank in action and collecting water from the source blocks. It can also do this with milk or lava or whatever. There's upgrades you can put on it. Honestly, I don't know of them, and I don't care because I just want water with this thing. We're going to use water for two purposes here, but right now we're using water to fill the fluid loader for the locomotive so that it can be filled with enough water so that it doesn't really dry itself out of steam. And same thing here. I also have an item loader there so it can load up with charcoal, the steam locomotive that is. And then it has the fluid unloader, which I have placed in the wrong place, which will unload the oil from the tank carts. And back at the pump, there's another fluid loader that will fill up the tanks with oil. It's honestly a relatively simple process. Also, locomotives are impossible to place the right way because I literally actually don't know. I'm going to be honest with you. Railcraft sometimes works in a way that I don't think anyone should or does know how it works. I link up the train with the carts and I fill it with some water, a little bit of charcoal, and I let it get off to the races. Give it a minute to start up from cold, and it is off. And it will be collecting oil. Well, hopefully, at least. Honestly, at the time I was recording this, I was probably still finagling with it a little, but it ultimately is collecting oil autonomously for me, which is the real goal. Oil is only so useful. Well, oil is pretty useful, which is why we're storing it in a massive iron tank in that area that I just added to pretty recently. Wow, funny how that works out. Anyways, I'm going to be storing oil, but all this oil will be turned into diesel, and that is what the next part of this episode is about. It is about my work to create an automated diesel setup. So, the way you get diesel is it's a mixer combination of heavy fuel and light fuel. Heavy fuel and light fuel you get by chemical reacting sulfuric light fuel or sulfuric heavy fuel respectively with hydrogen gas. Sulfuric light fuel and sulfuric heavy fuel are products from distilling oil. By the way, I just decided to ride the train now for fun because I'm really proud of it. It's a fun little train. Yes, so heavy fuel and light fuel, which we get as a product of distilling oil. So what I need is I need a setup that will automatically create hydrogen, will automatically create sulfuric light fuel, and will automatically create sulfuric heavy fuel, and then will also automatically combine the two in a mixer. And that sounds difficult. It is a little bit difficult, but it's not too terribly difficult. So, well, I gotta get started on it. But before that, more Thaumcraft. This Thaumcraft thing in particular, I believe, is just something that increases my draw rate from nodes, so not actually that useful. This one here is something that gets me enchanted fabric, which I won't be using. I'm just kind of like digging out a little bit of Thaumcraft while I can, because I know that Thaumcraft can be pretty annoying, but I don't want to use Thaumcraft without Thaumcraft. Anyways, I make the electrolyzers. So in order to get hydrogen, I'm going to obviously need to electrolyze stuff for that. In this case, I'm going to be electrolyzing water into hydrogen and oxygen. And because one electrolyzer is a little bit slow and hydrogen and oxygen is used for a lot, I decided to make two electrolyzers for hydrogen for water. And I'm not going to get into the wiring of these setups because it takes forever to explain and it takes forever to do, and it's really, really boring, honestly. So, no wiring explained. You're going to have to deal with it. And I complete out a bunch of things: brewing stand, enchanting table, and I think more mastery quests, more things for node tapping and stuff. Nothing too interesting, just more Thaumcraft to complete more Thaumcraft. Again, breaking up the monotony of all the machine crafting. And here is something for node preservation. Back to machine crafting, here I make two distilleries. The correct ratio of distilleries for making diesel is two heavy fuel distilleries to 1 to 3 light fuel distilleries. I don't know why I said one, but I only have 1 and 1 here, mostly just because I didn't realize that math until doing it like 3 hours ago. Also, two chemical reactors. In this case, these are two chemical reactors for making the light fuel and the heavy fuel from the sulfuric light fuel and the sulfuric heavy fuel. And yeah, so to the 2 to 3 thing, I mostly just didn't do it because I kind of didn't need to do it at this point. If I was making diesel, then I would be making it fast enough, probably. Anyways, here I'm setting up the automated hydrogen and oxygen setup. I happen to be pretty lucky and get polyethylene from a quest reward, so I spent that polyethylene on making these super tanks, which can store 1,000 buckets of a liquid, which is very nice, especially for things that I need a lot of, like obviously hydrogen and oxygen. Hydrogen I'm going to use immediately. Well, oxygen I'm not going to use immediately, but it's something that I'm still going to end up using for a lot of recipes, even if not ones directly involved in oil processing. So it's still good to have automated. By this point, I had set up the wiring for the heavy fuel and light fuel. You do not want to see it. It is an absolute nightmare behind there. So I kind of did a test run with the batteries to see, all right, what would happen if I filled it up with some power and then got it to run. I hooked it up with the hydrogen that we have coming from the super tank, and then we get our first bits of heavy fuel and light fuel. There's a quest earlier on that actually recommends you use light fuel for LV power, but I'm going straight to diesel, baby. Uh, in this case, we have to make diesel in actually an MV mixer, which I made. It's not difficult. I just forgot where I left the clip, so there we go. And here you get 6 buckets of diesel with 5 buckets of light fuel and 1 bucket of heavy fuel. And I finish up the automation there by setting up the item pipe that will pipe the cell from the diesel mixer into the heavy fuel tank. Again, this piping stuff I really don't want to cover, and I really don't need to cover because it's just kind of a bunch of useless fluff that I have to do in order to get it to actually be properly automated. No doubt I'm proud of it, but it's just not that interesting to go through, and it's pretty monotonous. Uh, what's far more interesting is the fact that if I just sit here and let it wait, it will accrue diesel for me totally automatically. Well, once I hook it up to power, that is, and I still haven't done that. So here we have the automated diesel. Here we have the basic components of the automated diesel. But we don't quite have it automated because there's still no power going to these machines. And in order to provide power, I wanted MV combustion generators. But I was running out of aluminum, so I decided to put a silky jewel on my shovel and get to mining out clay in the Twilight Forest for it. Once I find a mesa, we're definitely going to be doing that to get our clay, to get our aluminum fixed. But for right now, there's a few options that are good for aluminum, that being clay and mica. But After that, we get the advanced combustion generators. They're not terribly difficult, just some MV components, some aluminum, and some of the circuits. And I need to transform them down in order to get them to the correct type of power. So in these cases, I need 2 low voltage transformers. And then that is all. Well, that's all for the machines. That's, again, not all for it, because I still need to provide, the diesel to these generators. Speaking of diesel in generators works to provide for 460,000 E total for its entire run thing. So it's a really, really efficient source of fuel compared to something like steam. As you can see there, it is only using about 3 diesel per second. So it is ridiculously efficient in terms of its usage, which is why I wanted to use it. It is something that will be able to power most of my machines, and it's also not something that's too hard to make. Well, I say that diesel is fully automated, but that's a little bit of a white lie. Diesel is not fully automated. The thing about diesel that's not fully automated is actually sulfuric acid disposal. You see, in the chemical reactor recipe, you get hydrogen sulfide as a byproduct, and I just physically don't have enough space to dispose of it in a way that even looks nice. So I kind of choose to ignore it for now. And that's a fine idea because I don't generate hydrogen sulfide quickly. As you can see, I already got 26 buckets of diesel, and the hydrogen sulfide hasn't even become a problem. So it's not fully automated. I can't just AFK for 800 hours and it will accrue so much diesel I don't know what to do with it. No, I'm gonna still have to babysit it a little, but it is far less babysitting than the steam generator requires, than the boiler and all that stuff. So I like it a lot more, and it will absolutely become useful once we start moving into HV, which, well, that will have to happen later. Right now, we're barely even in MV. But with the pipe set up underground, that is the entire diesel setup finished. 100% complete. We have automated diesel. We have effectively automated power. And yeah. With that power, however, comes great responsibility and also a great end to the video. This one felt a lot shorter because there was a lot more parts I could cut out, like the whole rail building section and a bunch of the Thaumcraft shenanigans I got up to. But it really shouldn't be understated that this is an incredible achievement. We have a very strong, a very expandable source of power. And that is the real achievement that we accomplish in this episode. There's a bit of a diesel processing line that exists in Gregtech New Horizons, where you can modify your diesel into something like Celu Nitrozine or Celu Nitro diesel or whatever. But I don't know if we're gonna go for that. My plan was to maybe go for gas generation, go for benzene, but those are gonna be problems that we're gonna have to deal with later, because what we have now is a problem that was just solved. So anything else we're gonna have to do, I think that'll be a problem for next time.